Future Fit Marketing podcast is brought to you by me, Amanda Bear. We'll talk about topics that you don't normally read about in marketing literature that tell you more about the what, but not the how of marketing in the real world. You'll hear great conversations with marketing, communications, and media leaders and up-and-comers who've been testing and learning and paving the way every day. Visit futurefitmarketing.com.au for access to resources and past podcasts. Welcome to another episode of Future Fit Marketing. There are plenty of stories of brands who have suffered serious brand reputation issues and significant business impacts, whether it's from external factors or backlash from tone-deaf companies who just haven't read the signs of the times with their own activity. Brand reputation is built over years, and depending on the strength of what you've built, it can be destroyed very quickly and take years to rebuild. We understand stuff happens. Think Malaysian Airlines plane disappearance. Or poor judgments can be made, such as the mishandling of redundancies by Better.com, where the CEO laid off 900 employees over Zoom altogether. And we're certainly seeing the significant backlash Optus is feeling right now, with the most significant data breach in Australia's history that keeps playing out in the media over and over. And of course, Qantas, a brand that evokes a sense of Aussie pride with a solid reputation that's been built over decades. It's really seeing some serious erosion with how they handled their COVID response, from serious reduction of loyal staff, outsourcing critical areas vital to the company's performance, long delays at airport and via customer service, and not addressing growing divides between leadership and the frontline staff, to name a few. If you build a solid reputation with a loyal following, you can quite often weather the reputational storm. The issues become a blip in the brand's long history. How a brand owns their challenges and responds to the mounting criticism, and fast, will determine if customers more permanently turn their noses up at your brand or decide to stick with you for the long term. Someone who's no stranger to weathering a reputational storm is Kara Glamore, Vice President of Carnival Cruise Lines. She's been in the travel industry for 5 years and joined Carnival Cruise Lines, the world's largest cruise line, in 2019. Prior to that, Kara led marketing, strategy and innovation teams at Stays, part of the Expedia Group, Caltex and Nestlé. Kara's featured as a top woman in media and has been a member of a number of industry advisory boards. Heads up, apologies for the sound quality on this episode. Okay, so in this episode, we speak to Kara Glamore, who is the Vice President of Carnival Cruises. Kara is going to share with us a remarkable tale of resilience. Now, this is through nothing but the toughest time in the travel and cruise industry's history. I am going to take you back to early part of 2020. We are at the early stages of the coronavirus, and much of the country was talking about lockdown for the first time. There really is a lot of confusion and lack of clarity on protocols, what to do next from the government. Cruise lines, as you know, were also letting passengers disembark without the understanding of the severity of COVID-19. Then lockdowns were announced across the world, and Australia also shut down. Can you talk through what was happening in the company during this time, and how did the news unfold at Carnival?
Yeah, I remember it, unfortunately, like it was yesterday, and it was a really dark time, I have to say. So we had a ship out in the water and had heard about this pandemic that all of a sudden went from this far away type of issue to a really close-in issue. And it was in March 2020. We pulled our last ship in port, and so as a Carnival brand, the one I manage, we disembarked everybody, and there were some people on board that had COVID. And we, at that point, didn't know what to do and, how to handle that. But we knew that the health and safety of our crew and our passengers was paramount. So then there were ships that came in after us, and some of which had some really high numbers of COVID. And as you know, unfortunately, everyone's seen in the news, it's kind of the history kind of speaks for itself. And it was at that point that the Australian government said, we are shutting down cruising. So that was something we didn't expect to hear, because we were in scramble mode, because this is like nothing we've ever had. We've had other certain things happen on board that you have to take into account, but it was a very dark moment when Australia says, we don't want your ships in Australian waters. And so we had to sail all of our ships, in my case two, out of Australian waters to we didn't know where.
Wow.
And as it turns out, those two ships sat off of the coast of the Philippines for a while. They sat in a dock in Dubai for the better part of the time that they were banned from Australian waters. And it was a dark time for cruising overall, because there are pictures out there that if you're, off the coast of Singapore, you can just see, 20, 30 ships just perched, not doing anything. Getting our crew home was probably one of the most harried experiences that we had, because if you think about it, there's 1,000 crew from all over the world that are, amongst this pandemic with us, and we have to get them home, and they live in India and Eastern Europe and all over the world. So making sure we got those individuals home healthily and with the utmost safety was a real challenge. But we ended up, obviously we accomplished that. And for 2.5 years, the cruising industry was banned from Australian water. So
Wow.
Arguably, I know I'm biased, but arguably you could say that cruising was the hardest industry hit overall, because we didn't collect revenue for 2.5 years. And that was really tough. And it was tough on the people, it was tough on cruisers, loyalists, and it was just tough on the nature of travel and the holiday that people always wanted, and was all of a sudden put this, very bad cloud over it.
So you personally, what was going through your mind at that time? How did you cope?
Yeah, I think as everyone was just really fearful, really confused, kind of in disbelief that this was happening, and thought it was going to be, I think, temporary. But in fact, it just kept, going and getting worse. And then, 2 steps back, 1 forward. And I was really concerned, from a business perspective, I was really concerned about my team and how they were coping, because a lot of them are really young. So we have a lot of young up-and-comers in my team. We had to make a number of redundancies. Everyone in the company had to go to 4 days to save on cash flow. Some of my team I would say 50% of my team had to go to 3 days, and then a good handful had to go to 2 days. So, and some people decided to leave. Some people didn't want the uncertainty. They just couldn't handle it, and they didn't want the association with the cruise industry, because they, thought it was a reflection of themselves and their choice. But overall, I think everyone stuck in there. Everyone hung in there. But it was a very interesting challenge as a leader to be able to work through something like that when you can't give your staff certainty. Everyone wanted certainty, and we couldn't give certainty because it wasn't up to us. It was up to the Australian government to tell us when we were going to sail.
You touched earlier on about passengers disembarking who had COVID, ships parked out of Singapore, etc. It would have been quite challenging from a PR perspective for the company. Can you talk about how the business responded?
Yeah, so PR-wise, I've never been challenged more with reactive and crisis PR in my life.
Wow.
I felt like I was pretty good at it, Amanda, but it was really challenged. So it was a whole different type of PR. It was managing crisis. It was managing, unfortunately, in some cases, people from your ship being quite unwell and having, I guess, sourced the disease from the group on board. It was managing people and loyalists who were just very angry at the industry for not giving their money back soon enough, for not refunding fast enough, for not, because as you can imagine, the call center was ringing off the hook with what's up with my cruise, am I going to get my money back, etc. And as much as we in the end got everyone's refund back or gave them a future cruise credit, because some people wanted to stick with it and save it for the next cruise, we just had to continue to give people it was all about reassurance. And I kept telling my team, it's about reassurance. It's making sure that we let them know that they can still believe in cruising, and that we're always going to have our health and safety first. We're always going to have the perspective of the guest first in terms of getting their money back or getting them on the right cruise when the time is right. So it was really about managing what the truth was versus what the media was scaling. Because the media wanted to scale. There's something about the cruise industry that just media loves to make it a bigger deal than it is, and in both positively and negatively, but most of the time negatively. And it was really up to us to kind of make sure the truth was separated from the salaciousness of the media, and in the end tell people that they are going to get refunds, we are caring about them, and just giving people that reassurance, because thanks to what happened, there was a lot of trust that was broken. So it was about building that reassurance, building that trust back up, making sure that all the protocols and how we were revamping our ships for when they came back with different ventilation systems, different cleaning protocols, our protocols are completely revamped, is making sure that everyone knew that we were doing everything that we could to make it not only the best experience, but a better experience, and probably the safest way to travel.
Obviously, before that all happened, you would have had your best laid plans mapped out. There's a long consideration process for travel and the cruise industry. Tell me what you had to pivot. What activities did the team roll out outside of just reassuring passengers?
What didn't we have to do? So no, it's the most overused word, but it's agility.
Yes.
We had to change everything we knew about cruising and think about it another way, because our bag of tricks that we had before were not going to work. Nothing that we were doing previously was going to cut it. It was a new environment. Like, it was a new line in the sand. It was a new mentality of the customer. It was, everything had changed. And because of what the media had done to cruising, we were always battling that. So we always had to be many steps ahead of what was expected from the guests. So we pivoted greatly in terms of how you sail. So I would argue that still right now, cruising is the safest way to sail. We are sailing 95% vaccinated, which no venue or concert hall or supermarket or mall has that standard, but we are 95% vaccinated. And you have to apply for an exemption if you are in the 5%. So we're very selective about that. We have had to change all of our seating and to have social distancing. And you consider it to be a hotel and a resort, that takes a lot. We had to change all of the ways we serve things. So in terms of, if there's a buffet, it's now we serve it from the chefs. If it's in the entertainment venue, it's now every other seat. And if there are certain things, shore excursions. So when you travel to a destination, there's a shore excursion. So we also had to comply with all of the different regulations that these small, potentially third world, beautiful islands that we're working with, what they need to do. So we had to change all those protocols. But it's funny because there's a silver lining to it, because now it's just kind of forced us to be so conscious about health and safety to the nth degree that it's now just a way, and it's kind of molded into our way of working. So we have more cleaners, we have different ventilation systems, And you walk around and you're like, this place is safe. Like, I just went on a cruise the other week. It was our first cruise actually in 928
Oh,
days.
wow.
And,
Congratulations.
thanks. And it was wonderful, and people were so happy, but they had masks on. Don't have to wear masks anywhere else, but we feel as though it's still the right thing to do. And we've changed quite a bit. We've changed quite a bit, and I think the biggest one though is the 95% vaccination, because there's a lot of rules and regulations with that, and people aren't happy about it because those people that chose not to get vaccinated feel as though they're being excluded. But for us, it's just a real measure of the health and safety standards that we're going to. Oh, and also she mentioned medical on board. But like now, all the ships are outfitted with proper medical centers, with ventilation systems, etc. So if anything, God forbid, did happen, we're prepared. We're prepared. So lots of pivots. And in terms of doing business, like we had to, take a look at our communications, our pricing structure. It's just kind of permeated throughout the whole business and how we communicate.
You work for a multinational company as well, and quite often through crisis, things get lost in translation. You've got to have clear alignment on certain things. How did you work with your head office to align on what you couldn't say, what you could roll out, and what was okay or not?
Yeah. It's funny on that one, because I've worked for a lot of companies that have, since I've been in Australia, that have a home base in the U.S., and the U.S. is very different than Australia. I know that it's easy to think that we both speak the same language and, we are alike. The regulations are different, the politics are different, everything's a little bit different. So the biggest issue that we ran into with our home port, or our home base in Miami, is they were coming out of the pandemic and we were still in the true thick of it. So they came out of the pandemic and started sailing in May of 2021. We were still, working at home, still, highest amount of cases, Omicron, all of it. And they didn't understand why we weren't sailing. They couldn't understand why Australia was being so conservative. They didn't get it. And they kept saying, why aren't we pushing harder? And it wasn't a matter of us pushing harder. It was a matter of like the government rules and regulations. So I think we were a little bit of a source of frustration for them for a while, because we were dragging the chain, because we needed every ship in the water. So once we realized that the government wasn't moving and our two ships were still sitting off the coast of Dubai, what we ended up doing to help the better of the company is we took those two ships, because they're movable assets, and we moved them to the States. Okay. So this was really upsetting to guests, to employees, because you're watching your assets literally float away to another market, not sure when they're going to come back, if they're going to deem Australia unimportant. So that was really tough. I told my team, and there was some tears, because they're like, are we going to have a job? Like, what's happening? So I do think it was the right thing to do for the overall company, because those two ships sailing successfully, which they ended up taking Alaska on and doing Alaska tours, which are really popular, that worked really well. But there was definitely an uncertainty here of, are they going to come back? So the U.S. made some hard decisions, but I think it was still going to pay our paychecks. Like, them sailing in Alaska was still helping us stay employed, and we all did, but it was the strangest thing to be selling your product knowing your product isn't here, isn't on the shelf, so to speak. So, but we were selling for future. So that was a really interesting time with the United States. But I think when we got the green light, which probably was prompted by the government saw us moving our assets, and they knew how important cruising is. Cruising is a $5 billion industry to Australia, and they saw us moving assets, and I think they started to think, okay, we need to get moving on this. At which point, it was literally 2 weeks after we moved our ships to the States that they said, okay, we're loosening the reins for the cruising here. And then we announced that we were coming back. They're coming back, but they had a really successful Alaska season, and they left this market, and that was something that we really had to work hard with the U.S. because there was all these reasons why those ships could stay in America, but we, had to make sure that we were delivering all the reasons why it was so important for this one.
You said a few things there. COVID, obviously the length that has gone, no one expected that.
Yeah.
I'm curious to understand how you approached planning over that period of time, what demand looked like, and then it sounded like you were completely beholden to government protocols, etc. How did you manage through all of that?
Yeah, so demand was minimal because with cruise ships you launch 2 years in advance, so you only can open sailings for 2 years out. So that's all we had to work with. That's it. And so demand was minimal. People were still booking, but they were booking really far out, really, really far out because they wanted to be sure. I think also people were just not feeling like it was the right choice. They were feeling as though, at the time, I think Airbnbs and stays were going through the roof, but they didn't feel as though cruising was the right choice. So all of our communications had to, like I keep saying, reassurance. It had to inform people of the changes they were making. So it was less about, we had a campaign called Come See Your Backyard, and it was all about making people understand that when we did come back, we were going to come back domestically. We weren't going to be coming back, with the South Pacific and, Papua New Guinea, etc., Vanuatu, to make them feel reassured that we were going to keep them in the safety of their own backyard. We were going to keep them in the safety of a vessel that had all the protocols that you could ever want and need to feel safe. It just really kept pounding that reassurance and that, because that trust had been broken so badly. And it actually worked really well. I think people were really appreciative. People felt informed. We used it through our Facebook. Our Facebook was our main channel because we have hundreds of thousands of loyalists, and they wanted to hear how the crew was doing. They wanted to know how their favorite people that now are in India are doing, and so we had a lot of interaction with that type of thing. But so yeah, it was that reassurance. We couldn't stress it enough, and just kind of in a fun way, because our brand is all about fun. In a fun way, telling people all these advancements that we've made, all these new ways of working, like the fact that we have an app now where you can order food anywhere on the ship, that you can order it to your room or you can order it on your lounge chair, and you can do everything. There's virtual queues that you don't have to stand in line. So really pushing our technology.
Now, as a leader in the business, how did your leadership style change, if at all? And what sort of key principles did you apply over that time to keep the staff morale up and motivated?
Yeah, it was, I really had to dig deep, because you wanted to, as a leader, you were feeling your own things, and you were just like, gosh, you had your own worries, but you had to, I just really wanted to think about my team and how they were feeling, because a lot of them, as I mentioned, were younger. And what I learned is that you always had to be transparent as possible. So there were no secrets. It was like, whatever I knew, I told them. Whatever headquarters said we were going to do, I made sure to tell them, because I wanted them to feel informed. Because what I realized in this time is that speculation is damaging. Speculation of what could be or what might not be was really, really detrimental, and there was a lot of it. So we just needed to rule out any speculation. The other thing that I wanted people to feel is that they had a home base in the team, and I kind of restructured the team so that there were less big projects and a lot of little projects, so that more people could work together cross commercially, because a lot of times you go into your siloed marketing function, siloed trade, etc., and we needed to be there for each other and be a safe space, because we were all working remotely. We all were feeling our own struggles, but if you felt this like safe space in this little community of the team, that I think really reassured people. And we had more, small but total group meetings. I just wanted to make sure we were always checking in on each other. So I think that's how we changed it too. We've kind of kept it that way moving forward because people just like it. They like to be tapped in. They like working with different functions. So we've kind of kept that now that we're back in the office 3 days a week. So that was really important. The other thing that you can't really make people have, but you have to coach for resilience. So to coach people to understand there's going to be change, to coach people to understand you have to have a plan B, to coach people to embrace testing and learning. So then if something doesn't go to plan, their bounce back is a lot stronger. And because picking people up after a hard loss is, especially this one, is really difficult. So we're all about testing and learning so that we can pivot, like you say, so that we can understand that way worked, this way didn't. And we're doing a lot of like small starts, I call them, to be able to scale long term if they work. I always tell my team, what's the plan B? Just in case, what's the plan B? Because it's almost like you have to have two plans at once or two paths. And I think it's just it's become a natural way of working. Like if this doesn't work, what's going to? So everyone goes into it knowing that there's going to be tweaks, that there's going to be movement. And I think if you go into it knowing that, you're much better suited to handle whatever the outcome is. And so that's kind of what I tried to coach people. And then the wins are so much sweeter when you get that, because you know you've really covered a lot of bases, and you know that your hard work and your decision making paid off.
We are almost 3 years on since the industry was really brought to a standstill. One, what are you seeing demand looking like, and where do you see the opportunities for Carnival?
We have ships in Sydney and Brisbane, and the demand is there. So we are sold out on our Sydney-based cruises through January. So that's a great sign. We've just opened. We have a brand new ship actually in Brisbane. So during this whole pandemic, we had to actually scrap a number of ships because it naturally just was a fast forward. We were going to do it anyway, but I think it's just something that we push forward quicker. We acquired a few new ships. So Carnival has a huge network of cruise lines, one of which is Costa. So we acquired a Costa ship, which are beautiful ships. They were based in Italy. And so we have an Italian ship, Luminosa, coming to Brisbane in November. And she has been carnivalized, I can say, but she's a brand new ship. So that's a new offer that we're going to have. That demand we thought was going to be a little bit soft because we only launched it a couple of months ago for a sailing in November. And normally people need about 8 months to book a cruise, 8-month lead time. And we're selling out of those as well. So it's showing that the demand is there. I feel as though we're getting a lot more new to cruise, which was a worry at one point. We're definitely getting the loyalists without a doubt, but the new to cruisers who are seeing this as a really great value, because I don't know if you've tried to take a flight lately, Amanda, but it's very expensive.
Yes.
So getting to and from places on a flight is really difficult, but you can take a cruise with the whole family, with everything included, for a really reasonable price, and I think people are aware of that. So what they're also going to be able to do after December is sail to the South Pacific. So what we were doing in the last couple of months is only sailing domestically. So, beautiful cruises to the Great Barrier Reef, to Tasmania, New Zealand. But as of December, we're opening it up to New Caledonia. We're opening it back up to Fiji, to Vanuatu. There's a few Papua New Guinea cruises. So all those beautiful places that you want to see further afield are going to be an option. So yeah, we're trying to open it up as normal. Yeah, the demand is there. The demand is there. Families, lots of families, which is really great because it's such an economical way for a family to travel because, like I said, for the most part, all the meals are included, all the entertainment's included, the bar is not included, but you can take an amazing trip as a family for a fraction of the price of what you would, take to go to the Gold Coast, or, and then the rigmarole of the logistics of that cruise, or of that trip versus a cruise. So yeah, the demand is there, and we're feeling much, much more positive. And especially now that we're actually in the water sailing, the feeling, the feeling in the office is just, everyone's kind of, walking on with a high. So it's been really, it's really helped our morale, and, just really helped the general excitement, and helped us live our true values of fun. So that's also very, very good.
Amazing. Last question for you, because this podcast is also about being future fit in marketing and leadership as well. Is there any advice that you'd give to our listeners on how to become future fit?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously coming from an extreme example, but as I've mentioned before, it certainly doesn't hurt to have a test and learn environment. It certainly doesn't hurt to have plan Bs in the background. Not that we're ever going to go through a pandemic again, but when you do reach those, really big bumps in the road, you have to be able to have a really quick turnaround option. All of those plan Bs and all those small test and learns will help you run a better business, I think. So it will just help you be so prepared and over prepared that you're not gonna lose. And that has worked really well for us, and that, I guess, agility has helped us come back with a vengeance. And that is something that, America now looks at us and they can't believe that we're filling ships with such a short time span, and they're in ways still struggling, and they're looking to us now because we've kind of done it with such diligence that they're like, how did you do that? So now they're looking to us for advice. So that's a really, interesting thing. So I would say plan Bs and test and learns are your best friend, because you'll forever be prepared and helping the business move forward. There's a book actually that I've had my team start to read, and it's Switch by Dan Heath, and it's all about accepting change, and it's all about understanding change and how change is good and how change can be for the positive, because that's something that, if we've learned nothing else, cruising has been faced with a lot of change, and it's actually sometimes a good thing. It's gotten you out of bad habits that you rested on. It's making you think differently about how you're going to excel in a business versus plateau. So there's been a lot of good that's come out of our change. And I think we're as a business stronger and more prepared as a result.
Well, thanks so much, Kara, for sharing your ultimate story of resilience. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Talk soon.
Thanks, Kara. Take care. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, share this podcast series with someone else, and thanks for paying it forward.